Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the Cryptodamus Astrology channel. I'm Cryptodamus here. Thanks for joining us again. I want to talk about this upcoming eclipse this week on Friday, May 5th, and give you some information about that. First of all, been getting a lot of questions about this eclipse, and I'm going to tell you all about it. So, first of all, let's just talk about eclipses in general, kind of what that means, right? So generally speaking, you get eclipses twice a year, about every 6 months. And that's when the sun and moon line up with the nodal axis, the north and the south nodes. That's when you see the eclipse periods. The closer they are to the nodes, the more likely you're going to be to have a total eclipse of the sun or the moon. So we're in between the two eclipses now, right? We just had a solar eclipse, a new moon on April 19th, and that was the first eclipse in Aries. It's at 29 degrees Aries. The nodes are actually still in Taurus, Scorpio. We'll talk about that in a minute. But we had the first eclipse in Aries, and we're going to be having eclipses in Aries for the next 18 months. This upcoming eclipse on Friday, May 5th, is going to be at, I believe, 14 degrees Scorpio. And so that's continuing the series in the Scorpio Taurus axis that we've had over the past year and a half. And I think there's one more eclipse in Scorpio later this year in the fall. So we're not done completely with that cycle, but it is transitioning into Aries Libra, and that's going to be a big change. But for now, the eclipse is still going to be in Scorpio this Friday. Now, eclipses in general, I see them as, shadow events, right? Because they literally, it's about casting a shadow. So, with the solar eclipse, the moon comes in front of the sun from the perspective of the earth and casts a shadow on the earth. Um, and in the lunar eclipse, the earth gets in between the sun and the moon, and it blocks out the light rays from the sun from hitting the moon. So you also get the earth casts a shadow on what would otherwise be a bright full moon. So I see them as shadow events, and I think that this relates to some of the psychological concepts that Jung had talked about, of the shadow elements of the psyche. So I think it's really common that we can kind of have these kind of confrontations with the shadow and shadow experiences with the shadow material of our own psyche, but it could also be through confrontation with other people. Partners, spouses, girlfriends, boyfriends, family, children, grandparents. It could be at work, it could be bosses, it could be friends or family. So it could come to us, or clients could come to us through a variety. It could actually be larger issues. Like the August 2017 total solar eclipse in the United States. That's when we saw the Unite the Right rally, and that was a lot of extreme right wing hate groups came out, and we saw the shadow elements of society. So that was on a larger scale of that was on a larger kind of scale of the whole country of the United States. So that was definitely a shadow event. But just in interpersonal relationships, it can bring up the shadow. We may have to confront somebody's fear, anxiety, worry, anger, hatred, jealousy, lust. It can bring out these very extreme greed, very extreme emotional states. Eclipses, they tend to exaggerate our sentiments, exaggerate our emotions, and bring out those shadow elements, right? Now, if we are able to sort of like confront our own personal shadow and the shadow that we encounter through other people, if we can hold space for that with patience and compassion, it can actually be an opportunity for great personal transformation. So it's not always a negative experience. It could lead to a breakthrough, but that doesn't mean it would be easy or pleasant or enjoyable. Although sometimes the eclipses can bring more like extremely enjoyable events as well. To some degree, that will depend on exactly where it falls in your natal chart. Also, sometimes it could be make a really nice configuration in our charts, and pleasant things can happen. But more commonly, it's going to be eclipses tend to have a kind of a rough edges. So, um, And so that's, yeah, they're kind of they're big turning points in the year, and they can bring extreme kind of world events sometimes, or events that shake up the markets, the financial markets. So we can see that type of stuff. A lot of people have, of course, pointed out that the last lunar eclipse we had on, I believe it was on November 8th. That's when we had the collapse of the cryptocurrency exchange FTX. It happened almost right to the day on the last lunar eclipse. A lot of people are asking me if I see something like that. Well, first of all, let's go ahead and take a look at the current alignment for the solar eclipse. And this is set up for Friday, May 5th. This is my Luna astrology software, which I tend to use on my YouTube channel here. So it's a great astrology software, and you can sign up for that too at lunaastrology.com. If you use the code CryptoDamus, you'll actually get a discount fee. It's a wonderful astrological software program in the cloud. Excuse me. So this solar eclipse is problematic. Generally speaking, I would say it is somewhat problematic. Number one, because the moon is in the sign of its fall in Scorpio. It's a suboptimal placement for the moon. The moon doesn't particularly like Scorpio. It likes Taurus, where it's exalted, the opposite sign, because Taurus is a sign of stability and peace and tranquility and prosperity and wealth. And the moon finds a great sense of emotional security in the sign of Taurus. The moon in the sign of Scorpio is given to a bit more dramatic emotional expressions, or otherwise known as acting out. Or it can also sometimes be a kind of a holding in, and there's a kind of a simmering, brooding, or sulking quality to the moon in Scorpio, where there's a really intense emotional energy going on, but it's just simmering below the surface. So either way, usually the moon isn't terribly happy in Scorpio. Scorpio is a sign of letting go, embracing change, and personal transformation, but also in financial astrology, it is a sign of loss. Opposite the wealth sign of Taurus. Taurus is a sign of gain, peace, prosperity, holding on to things. And Scorpio is a sign of losses and letting go of things. So in financial astrology, it's not the greatest. It's a south node eclipse, which can also bring losses. So there's a bit of a doubly problematic. It's a bit doubly problematic there. The third problem, the third problem is that it's ruled by Mars. Mars is in the sign of Cancer, debilitated in the sign of Cancer. So the eclipsed moon is debilitated in the sign of Scorpio, and the eclipse ruler is debilitated in the sign of Cancer. Okay. So you can see why this is shaping up to be a difficult eclipse. The fourth problem is that is afflicted by an opposition from Uranus at 18 Taurus. So it's an opposition within 4 degrees, about 4 degrees, a little bit less than 4 degrees, 3 and some change. Oppositions to Uranus bring very unexpected, unpredictable events. Okay. They're really impossible to predict. The only thing we can really say is to expect the unexpected. And let's talk about some possibilities here, right? The oppositions to Uranus, they bring chaotic, unexpected surprises. So oppositions to Uranus introduce the element of surprise. And eclipses are already, as I said, rough edges. They're edgy, they're rough, they're tense. In and of themselves, they have a tendency to be chaotic. The opposition to Uranus intensifies the already chaotic feeling of this. So I would continue to expect to see really surprisingly unexpected events unfolding over the next few days. And we did have that surprise, sudden chaotic collapse of FTX. We'll talk about why I think this one's a little different. There's a nice positive here, though, and that is that the moon is actually in a trine to eclipse ruler Mars, and they actually have what's called mutual reception. They're in each other's signs. The moon is in the sign of Mars, and Mars is in the sign of Cancer, and they're in a harmonious trine to one another. And there's this factor of mutual reception, although they're both debilitated in each other's signs. So that doesn't make that mutual reception particularly great, but it does possibly mitigate it to some extent. Okay. And I like that trine from the moon. I like that trine from the moon to Mars. Okay. I do like it. It's something positive we can talk about. The other thing that's positive is that Venus will be in a harmonious sextile to Jupiter that day. Venus at 27, Gemini is going to be in a nice, harmonious, positive, partile sextile to favorable Jupiter. So you have the two benefics are in a harmony aspect to each other. And that goes a long way to mitigating some of the effects of this eclipse. So that's a favorable, and I think that will work out in a good way. Overall, that will stop this from being a catastrophic type of eclipse. Now, if I go and I look at the eclipse of last year, no, I'm not, I'm saying this still can bring challenges. It can still bring chaotic, unexpected events. It can still shake up the markets, but I don't see it as bad as last year. Now, if we look at last year's eclipse, where we had the FTX collapse, well, in that case, the moon was actually exalted in Taurus. However, this was on November 8th, 2022. The moon was conjunct Uranus. Okay, that's quite a bit different, and it was within about 1 degree. That's quite a bit different than the opposition, because really in this case, Uranus itself is kind of really caught in the eclipse energy in a stronger way. So first of all, the moon was very closely conjunct Uranus on the November 8th lunar eclipse. It was on the North Node conjunct Taurus, which that would have been, you would have thought that that would have been more favorable. However, okay, the moon was also square Saturn. So it was emphasizing the square between Uranus and Saturn last year. That is the preeminent financial astrology aspect for crisis, is the Uranus-Saturn hard aspects. The year 2000, the dot-com explosion had a Uranus-Saturn square, conjunction. 2008 and 2009 financial catastrophe, Uranus-Saturn opposition, and the market drawdowns of 2022 Uranus-Saturn squares. So last year's eclipses were conjunct or opposing Uranus, but they were square Saturn. Okay, that was a crisis. That was a real crisis aspect. This year is a different year, folks. This year is a different year. The Uranus-Saturn aspect, hard aspect square, is completed. The markets have been up all year. This is a bullish market year. The energy is different. And although it's still opposing Uranus, it's no longer square Saturn, and now it's trine Mars. Okay. And Uranus and Mars themselves are in a sextile, which is positive. So, and again, that Venus, partile sextile, 60-degree angle of Venus at 27 Gemini to Jupiter at 27 Aries. I like that for some mitigation. It was actually exact the day before the eclipse, but that's okay. It will still have some power to protect us from the harsh energy of this eclipse. So overall, the eclipse is problematic. I don't want to sugarcoat it and say it's going to be an easy eclipse. The moon is debilitated, okay, and the ruler of the moon is debilitated, and it's opposing the chaotic, unpredictable Uranus. This could bring some very strong climate type events, some freak storms, tornadoes, some type of hurricane, earthquake, volcanic eruptions. These are the kind of things we can see with Uranus. Strong, events, weather events that have unusual strength, very aggressive energies. We can see that kind of thing happen when there's an opposition to Uranus. But it's sudden, like a lightning storm or a volcanic eruption that came out of nowhere, or an earthquake type event, or a tornado. those kind of things that are very sudden and extremely aggressive, but they don't last for very long. For Bitcoin and the markets, I mean, the bank crisis, obviously, the Fed is meeting tomorrow, and I think this has a lot to do with the eclipse energy. The Fed is in a very, very difficult place right now. You know, the bank crisis is partially because of the raising interest rates that have caused the bond market to collapse, and that has damaged bank liquidity and equity. If they continue to raise rates tomorrow, they're really playing a very dangerous game. So now the other thing about this eclipse is that Mercury is retrograde. And the Fed, that could maybe indicate there's a change in the Fed policy. Maybe we'll see a surprise. Maybe we'll see a surprise of the Fed pausing this month. So with Mercury retrograde, I wouldn't be surprised to see if the Fed reverse course and take a pause tomorrow. I'm not saying it's 100% guaranteed. They could still raise rates 0.25 points. It's possible. They said they might do that. So we just have to see what happens here. Yeah, so that's with a big event this week that kind of ties into the eclipses. Let's see what the Fed does tomorrow. Mercury's retrograde. There could be a communication problem. Sometimes Chairman Powell has a difficult time, conveying. Like, the media really dissects every single word he says, and if he says one wrong word, the markets can react in extreme ways. So we may see some extreme movements in the markets on the Fed, meeting week. We often do, and that could continue to play out into Friday. Now, for Bitcoin, what we've seen all year, I'm just going to give you this one price hack for Bitcoin, which is what we've seen all year is that I'm going to just jump on my Bitcoin chart here for a minute, and I'm just going to show you if I turn on my moon phase indicator. I don't know why that's not working. Oh, there we go. For 2023, there's one thing that keeps showing up here that I wanted to show you, and that is every time this year, either right on, this is the full moon, right on the full moon, or just a few days after the full moon, we have had a big Bitcoin rally. Okay, here we had it right on the full moon. Here in February, we had it actually about 4 or 5 days after the full moon, right in between the full moon and the new moon. Every time this year, we've got a big move up. It's happened 4 times in a row. So I'm looking for a big move up sometime between the full moon on May 5th and the new moon on May 19th. So look for a Bitcoin rally sometime between a large rally sometime between May 5th and May 19th. I don't know the exact timing, okay? You'll have to join my Patreon group for that kind of detailed analysis, or at least follow my up to the moment tweets on Twitter. So that's basically my overview for this coming eclipse on Friday, May 5th. There's another big alignment coming in the middle of June that I'm going to talk about in the next video. That we have Mars is going to enter Leo, oppose Pluto in Aquarius, and they're both going to have a square from Jupiter and Taurus. Jupiter newly entering Taurus. That is a major aspect for violence and war. It's a very aggressive, dangerous aspect. And it comes around the middle of May, sometime around May 19, 20, 21st. And that's probably one of the most challenging aspects of 2023. So we'll talk about that one a little bit more when we get closer to that. But anyway, guys, thanks for joining us today. I hope you find this information on eclipses interesting, and please like and subscribe, and we'll do another video shortly. Thanks again for joining me today, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.